past week at the Bridge Church, we were in Mark chapter 10, verses 1 to 12. The same passage we were on last week when we talked about divorce. But this week we were looking at the implications of this text for two of the most controversial, divisive kinds of topics in our culture today, which had to do with gender and sex. And we looked at how Jesus kind of speaks into these areas, even without necessarily talking about them directly. And we started out by asking about our source of authority when it comes to these issues. And we talked about a range of authorities that we kind of turn to in our culture, and how we as Christians really turn to Jesus and really God's whole word, all of Scripture is where we go to for authority when coming to the conclusions we have about gender and sex. And we talked about how if Jesus is the authority, if he's our king, then we're not going to impose his rule from the top down, because that's not what Jesus does. And we talked about how if we're followers of King Jesus, then we're going to treat those that we disagree with, people that we think are actually wrong about these kinds of things, with love and with compassion, with a desire to serve them, because that's again what Jesus does. He dies for those who seek to take his life. So how much more should we love those we disagree with? We heard from a friend of mine who has dealt with some of this stuff quite personally, and just kind of looked at how the Bible kind of affirms that we are created male and female, and that sex is to take place within the marriage covenant between those two. And so my one big question for you, in light of everything we talked about in the sermon and the follow-up session afterwards, is this, and it's kind of the same question I asked at the beginning. To what authority do you turn to in coming to the conclusions you have about sex and gender, and are there any issues with that authority?